What's up, everybody? We are live. DraftKings MMA DFS picks UFC 277. Amanda Nunes, Julianna Pena, Brandon Moreno, Kai Kara France. Welcome. We're coming to you live from the DraftKings MMA Championship live final location. So if things look different, so that's because they are. Me and Moose, we're here out in Dallas, and joined as always by Jake the Snake, owner of MMADFS.com. Jake, what's up, dude?
Not a whole lot, man. How's Dallas treating you in that 110-degree weather?
We're trying to stay inside as much as we can because it is miserable outside. And yeah, just coming to you live with the stream. Got a brunch here in a little bit with all the contestants, and then later just building lineup, staying inside until the event later tonight, where we'll be put up in a suite. The sweat, all the fights, can't wait for it. So you guys are here watching live. What we normally do here is we break down the main event. There's two of them, two title fights, what they mean for DFS and betting purposes. Three newcomers on the card, their backgrounds, what we can expect from them on tonight's card, their stylistic matchups, everything you need to know about them. Good fighter, good matchup, bad matchup for the few fighters that have just a handful of UFC fights. A fight you have to target in DFS, some prize picks plays, and in our stream parlay of the week. You'll notice that this is a live Q&A. So if you have questions, throw them in the right of the YouTube channel. We'll answer them here along the way as we go. So we got RJ in the chat, Nigel in the chat. What's up, everyone? Appreciate it. Again, if you have questions at any time, stop us, throw it in there, and we will answer it. So, Jake, let's start. Two title fights. We got Nunes and Pena, the big upset last time. We got Cara France and Moreno, the interim title fight. And as we like to do on these pay-per-views, we like to break down historically what these types of cards have looked like for DFS purposes. So, Jake, when we have two title fights, what has the field done? What have winning lineups typically done? And what does it mean for low risk and high risk contests?
Yeah, so we've had 9 of these slates with 2 fights on them. We had a few with 3 going back to the start of 2021. But looking just at the 9 with 2 fights, 2 5-round fights, we had 4 times both favorites won, twice both dogs won, 3 times we had split between favorites and dogs. So the first 2 of those ended up being fight stacks, which, pretty stupid. The way that happened is we get only 1 to 2 underdogs winning on the entire card, and then we get the losing underdog in one of the 5-round fights, outscoring all but 1 or 2 of the other underdogs on the slate. So, it takes kind of the perfect storm where all favorites win. You get a 5-round fight that goes the distance. The underdog still scores 70, 80 points, outscores almost all the other underdogs. I wouldn't play that angle, but if you do, just keep in mind that the only way it hits is if you only get 2 underdogs basically winning on the entire slate. So just something to keep in mind, but really don't recommend playing that angle. So yeah, so really we're gonna look at the 7 since then, where we didn't have any fight stacks in those last 7. So in all but one of those, we had at least one 5-round fighter in the winning lineup, and the one where we didn't was actually the last Julianna Pena slate, where she would have been in the optimal, but she was so low owned that no one actually hit it. So still in the true optimal, not an actual winner. So basically, you want a minimum of one 5-round fighter in your lineups because every time there's been at least one in the actual optimal. So the last 3 times on these cards, we've seen one favorite and no underdogs end up in the winning DraftKings lineup. So that's the trend we currently have going. Before that, we had one slate where both favorites ended up in the winning lineup. And the interesting part about that is that was the RDA slate where he was like $7,300. And that was how it ended up being in there. So you can kind of throw that one out. So basically, we never have a slate where both favorites end up in the winner. So you don't want to start your lineup that way, which the majority of the field is going to. That's going to be the most popular build, is going to be both favorites. And after that, they're going to look at going to one favorite and one dog. And that's actually only hit 1 time in the last 7 slates. So really the best way to build lineups is just exactly one 5-round fighter, and it's typically going to be a favorite. The only time it was one dog, we had both dogs win, and I think it was Francis Ngannou ended up getting left out, and Davison Figueiredo ended up being the dog in the winner. So if both dogs win, it can be one dog, but generally it's going to be one favorite in the winning lineup. So that's kind of the optimal way for lineup construction.
Amazing stuff there.
Um,
That's hugely invaluable information for people building tournament lineups for the big $25 GPP on DraftKings. Now, what about low risk contests? Because you and I, we've talked all week about this, and you know, there are ways to double stack, right? We talk about on normal weeks
Mhm.
stacking the main event, but this week you can play both, right? You can stack Nunez, Pena in double ups, 50-50s, head to heads. You can stack Car France and Moreno, and then you can play pretty much whoever you want with the final two spots. But as we've talked about, that leaves a really thin margin of error, and you're basically guaranteeing two losers in your lineup. So how would you approach this week from a cash perspective? Because it is pretty tricky.
It is tricky because we were talking about, you look at it like picking the winner of Nunez and Pena is tricky. You know, Pena won the last one, so it's hard to say like Nunez is a lock, but Nunez is the female GOAT, so it's hard to say Pena is a lock. You'll get the other one. Kai Kara France has probably the highest floor for a cheap underdog because most likely that fight goes the distance. Should see a good amount of volume. So it's tricky with who you leave out, but like you said, you don't want to start your lineups with two losers. So if you play all four, you're guaranteed to have two losers. So you really want to leave one out, you know, try to get the two winners right, and then get one cheap dog. That's the optimal way to do it, just so you don't have two losers, because otherwise you really have to be perfect. And even if you are perfect, there's a decent chance you're going to split. You know, we've seen some of these cash contests where it's a really obvious cash line and you min cash, but so many other people do too. You don't even make money. So yeah, definitely go three of the 4 or 5 rounders in low risk contests.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense for sure. All right, and speaking of these two fights, Jake, since we've talked about the optimal way to build so much, let's keep this kind of brief. But Pena Nunez, Car France Moreno, quick thoughts on how you think the matchups play out.
Yeah, man. So I think it's pretty interesting on Nunes. You know, she hasn't won a fight at 135 pounds since 2019 against the Randomy. So it's been a while. You know, she was fighting up at 145 against lower level talent. She recently left American Top Team, started her own gym. Kind of concerning. 34 years old. That weight cut has to be a little bit tougher. I mean, there's lots of red flags here, but you know, she also won 12 fights in a row before the recent loss to Pena. You know, she had, I don't know if you call them excuses or reasons, but, you know, she had a knee injury. She had COVID before the last fight. I mean, it sounds like she's making excuses, but I mean, maybe there's something to it. I don't know, man. I think this fight is honestly almost close to a coin flip. I'd still give the edge to Nunes. I mean, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, but we've seen favorites who lose their belt really struggle to win it back. So a lot of the metrics point to Pena here. I mean, Pena's a couple of years younger. You know, she hasn't shown the cardio concerns that Nunes showed in her last fight. I mean, there's a lot of things going for Pena here, but I think both are in play. I think that one could go either way. I think it's largely going to depend on how Nunes' cardio holds up and how smart she fights. I mean, last time she was just throwing down in a brawl, just got hit in the face way too many times, no striking defense, ran out of gas, and basically gave up. I mean, she got subbed, but she quit. I mean, let's be real.
Yep,
And
exactly. So I mean, so do you see it's playing out the same way this time? What do you think? I mean, I know you see the odds are Nunez minus what minus 280 now as of this morning, but you just said you think it's closer to a coin flip, which I think is a pretty big indication. How do you think the public feels about this as far as ownership goes?
man, it's tricky, right? Because I mean, Nunes the last two slates she was 63% owned. Pena was like 4 or 5% owned last time. But recency bias is going to have a lot of people on Pena. You know, historical bias will have people on Nunes. So I think we're going to see Nunes' ownership come down some. I think we're going to see Pena more owned, but I still think we're going to see Nunes far more owned than Pena. You know, twice as owned easily, just based on the history and based on their scoring outcomes in DFS. I mean, when Nunes wins, historically she's put up massive scores. Pena hasn't always put up big scores. I mean, even in a win, I think Sarah McMahon, she scored like 91 points, third round submission. You know, she has ways where she gets controlled early on and then comes back to win a fight and doesn't necessarily put up a huge score. Whereas when Nunes wins, she dominates.
Right. I mean, you see you see the DraftKings game logs, right? How crazy
Right.
her scoring is, right? So, okay, so that's interesting. Real quick, before we get to the next fight, a couple questions in the chat. We got Meb, we got Evans asking about the live final experience and how it's looking. And yeah, I feel pretty confident about it. I don't think it's a typical week. I would much prefer if it was just like a random Apex card. I feel like that's where our biggest edges are. But you know what? I see some edges tonight, and I feel pretty good. My lineup is pretty much finalized for the championship, so I feel pretty good there. And then Evans is asking, are we meme mugging the other dudes in the room at the weigh-in? Now everybody's pretty cool. I think most people here are pretty chill. I know we were hanging out at dinner last night with occupied Discord member Clockwork, real cool guy, and yeah, just everybody's here. Everybody's excited to be here, right? Everyone's here to have a good time, and no one's really Maybe the vibe will be different today with more money on the line. When we get to the suite, maybe it'll be different. But so far, it has been cool. So these live finals are always great. Always encourage people if you have the bankroll to try to get out to one. So, all right, Jake. So speaking of this next fight, Moreno, Cara France, interim title fight somehow. How do you think it plays out?
Yeah, man. I really like Moreno. I think this one's a little more clear cut than the Nunes Pena fight. Moreno coming in 28 years old. Coming off the trilogy fights with Figueiredo. Fought Figueiredo way tougher than everyone was expecting. Close fight in the last one. Close decision. Could have gone either way. Won the one before that. First one was a draw. And then he's coming in. He's already beat Kai Kara France back in 2019. He beat him in a 3-round decision. Obviously everything goes exactly the same way the second time as it went the first time. We always say that. But Moreno, crazy durable, has never been finished in an official fight. He did get submitted by Alejandro Pantoja on Ultimate Fighter back in 2016. That's the only time he's ever been finished, and that was technically an exhibition match. BJJ black belt, should have a major grappling advantage, but we're not sure if he uses it. He didn't attempt a single takedown the first time they fought. France has a really good takedown defense. The thing about Moreno is he doesn't typically put up huge DFS scores. A little bit of a patient striker, doesn't really spam takedowns. So at 8,900, there are ways he fails in terms of DraftKings, even in a win. And then looking at Kai Kara France, 29 years old, I would call him lucky to be in this spot. You look at who he beat. He knocked out Bontarin after almost getting submitted. He knocked out Garbrandt, who's coming down from 125 and hasn't won a fight basically in 6 years other than a Sun Cow. I mean, I wouldn't even I don't know how that propelled him into a top contender fight. I mean, that was kind of a joke. And then he beats Askarov in a really close decision. Almost got submitted again in the first round there. I don't know, man. I think that Toja should be in this spot. I don't know why Kai Kara France is in an interim title fight, but he's improving. I mean, he's a decent striker. Doesn't offer anything really in terms of grappling other than his solid wrestling defense, but he's landed a couple of knockouts, even if one of them was against Garbrandt, which I'm not even counting as a knockout. I mean, get out of here. But yeah, I mean, it should be a close fight, right? I mean, these guys were actually roommates back in the Ultimate Fighter in 2016, and they've fought, so they know each other super well. I think we're going to see pretty much a pure striking battle. Maybe Moreno mixes in a takedown or two. It's probably going to be pretty close. He goes the distance, 4 rounds to get the decision.
I think the biggest key here is will Moreno wrestle, right? Because that's the key to unlocking his DraftKings upside. And if he's not going to wrestle, it's really difficult for him to hit the optimal lineup, right? Even in a win. Yeah, maybe he gets an early finish, pretty unlikely, right? But if he's not going to wrestle for 5 rounds, the volume we expect, it's going to be tough. And Jake, I truly don't think his ownership is going to match his ceiling. In the sense that I think he'll be over-owned based on what we expect from him here.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think he could score 90, 95, 100 points, somewhere in that range. I don't think he's going to wrestle much. I think maybe we see him. It's possible. Maybe he completely changes up his game plan. He just switched to Glory MMA and Fitness. He's training with James Krause now. A change in camps, you never know how that's going to affect it. Maybe they're like, Moreno, you have to wrestle. What are you doing?
True,
Stop just sitting here. So it's a little bit higher variance based on the fact that he changed camps, but I think we have to at least assume there's a decent chance he doesn't wrestle. He could wrestle, but he also could not wrestle. So we can't assume he will. And if he doesn't, like you said, it's going to be tougher for him to get there in volume alone. He's not a huge volume guy, not a huge finisher. I think there's a lot of ways he gets left out.
For sure. All right, let's move on. If you guys like what you see here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions, we're here till 9:30 or so, maybe a little bit later, depending on how many questions we get. Throw them in the chat. We'll answer them about this slate. Let's talk about the newcomers. We actually have 3 newcomers for a change. I feel like it's been a while since we've had multiple newcomers on the card making their UFC debut. And Jake, honestly, one of the more lower level types of fights and fighters that we've seen on a pay-per-view card. Pretty interesting. So let's start with the 3 guys. We'll start with the most expensive until the least expensive guys making their debut. Ihor Petso. I'm gonna mess the name up. I'm at the live final, so any mispronunciations do not count this week. Petioria making his debut. So give me the rundown on him. Background, what we expect this fight to look like.
Yeah, so Ihor comes in pretty raw, 26 years old. Kind of a sketchy record, He's 19-2, Some places you look, he's 20-2. One of these Ukrainian guys coming in with some creative record keeping. But if we're going with his 19-2 record, 14 of his 15 wins have come in the first round. He had another second round finish. So basically, a round one early win or bust guy. He's coming off a first round knockout on the Contender Series. He really hasn't fought many guys, man. It's super, super padded record. He's a powerful striker, but not super technical. I feel like he gets taken down a little bit easily. I wasn't very impressed with him, but he is one of those guys that has the power to finish a fight at any moment. But he fought at 185 pounds for a little bit. He went back up to 205 when he went on the Contender Series, and now he's facing a super durable 205 pounder who's never been finished. So I would say that's a little concerning for his finishing potential, and he's not a guy that's going to land a ton of volume and put up a big score without a finish.
Yep, totally agree there. All right, moving on. If we go down to the $7,700 range, Hamdi Abdel Wahab, Olympic wrestler for Egypt, that is. 5-0 in MMA, right? Not a huge strength of schedule here. Give me the rundown.
Yeah, so we got Hamdi coming in, 31 years old. Man, dude, like 5-0 record. He turned pro last October. Like, how is this guy in the UFC? He had 2 bare knuckle matches and then 3 MMA matches, 0 against legitimate opponents, and somehow he's getting the call up for the UFC. It's like they couldn't let Dontel Mays not be on a pay-per-view card. They had to bring this guy onto the card just to make sure Dontel Mays got to stay on.
How many days notice, by the way, was this?
This was 12 days notice for Hamdi after Justin Tafa dropped out of this fight. So yeah, less than 2 weeks notice. Really, really hard to make your debut here. I mean, this guy's a heavyweight and he's a stocky short heavyweight. Who knows what his cardio is going to be like on 12 days notice. But like you said, former Egyptian Olympic wrestler, theoretically has grappling upside, but I mean, a lot of his fights, he really just runs in, like charges his opponents, knocks them out. We did see him use the wrestling a little bit more in one of them and one of his amateur matches that went a little bit longer. But 4 of his 5 fights have ended in 33 seconds or less. I mean, you have to wonder about his cardio when he has one pro fight that's made it to the 1 minute mark and he's taking a fight on short notice. I mean, we could definitely see this guy gas out. But I would call him a wild card. He has theoretical grappling upside. He's shown power, never fought anybody in his life. So, I mean, he could, most likely he's going to look absolutely terrible. But there's always a chance. I mean, Dontel Mays isn't good either. So, like,
Right.
who knows? I mean, this is a wild card fight.
I mean, the thing is, right, like the fights have ended so quickly, but we've seen guys like that where it's like, all right, this dude's a beast, and he just goes and just like demolishes guys. But this is really a statement of his opponents, right? They're really just picking guys out of a crowd. I think I saw on Twitter someone said his most recent fight was against a vending machine technician, right? Like these guys aren't pro MMA fighters that he's fighting against. So yeah, big wild card here, short notice, gonna be tough to succeed. And then moving on, the final fighter making their debut. Guys, we see the questions in the chat. We'll answer them here in a second after we get after this final fighter making their debut. And that is all the way at the bottom, Adam Fugit, another short notice debut here against Michael Morales. Give me the rundown on Fugit here.
Yeah, man. When I saw this guy on the card, I was like, please tell me it's pronounced Fugit, but it's Fugit. So, like, hey, you want to fight on 9 days notice? Fugit. So, dude's 33 years old, only has an 8-2 record, and he only has 1 fight since 2019, which is obviously a big red flag. And that fight lasted 43 seconds. So, like, dude literally has 43 seconds of cage time in the last 3 years. One of his losses was against Paige Van Zant's husband, Austin Vanderford, a while back. And he also has a loss to Kalen Hill, a guy that lost on the Contender Series to Impa Kasanganay. I think this guy's looked pretty chinny, honestly. I think he's looked pretty easy to drop. I know he has a little bit of Muay Thai experience. He's primarily a grappler. I haven't been that impressed by him. He had some wins on the Hawaiian regional scene. Really hasn't faced much in terms of competition. And, when he tried to face someone like Kalen Hill, he got finished. I wasn't really impressed by his last opponent. So I'm kind of writing off that 43-second knockout. Yeah, I think this guy theoretically has grappling upside, but I think it's a bad matchup, and I'm not really sold on this guy. I think he most likely is probably a fraud. Coming in at 33 years old with only 10 pro fights on his record and really low activity, I'm not very excited about him.
Yeah, maybe it's a guy we target in the second fight, but honestly, I'm not even sure any of these guys are guys we're going to target in their second fight. Maybe, right? Maybe Potieria, but again, it's going to be tough to target these guys. Most of them on short notice in their debut. All right, let's get to some of these questions here. AO says, question, which fights beside the main event do you think will be optimal? So that's a quick transition here, Jake, and we can keep this kind of brief because most of the information that we talk about here is outlined in the daily plug, OccupyFantasy.com, where Jake gives his favorite plays, lineup construction tips, best bets, or MMADFS.com, where Jake breaks down every single fight from a betting and DFS perspective. Go check those out if you have more questions after the stream. But Jake, fight that you think whoever wins has a really good chance of ending up in the optimal lineup. That is not one of the 5 rounders because that's a cop out.
Yeah, no, I think the Edwards Kim fight, I think both of them have really, really high floors and the potential to hit a high ceiling. I think that's going to be probably the highest volume fight on the slate. You know, we got Edwards coming down. Her last fight was at 145. Normally she fights at 135. Kim's a 125 pounder. She hasn't fought at 135 since her debut. She's been she's been at 125 for the last like 6 fights since dropping down from 135. She's moving up to 135 on like 2.5 weeks notice. She had been set to face Agapova here at 125. Agapova drops out. And, you know, a little over 2 weeks before her fight, they're like, hey, you're going to fight Edwards now, and you're going to do it up at 135. And she just fought at 145. And now Edwards missed weight by 1.5 pounds. So Edwards should have the size advantage, at least in terms of like thickness. They're both pretty tall and rangy. But I think we're just going to see a ton of volume. And I think that Edwards theoretically has some finishing upside based on that size advantage. They're giving her a little bit more of a ceiling. But I think Kim has a really high floor for an underdog. So I think she has a really good chance to be a value play with a slight chance she could score like 100 points in a volume-driven decision, which at her price I think would almost lock her into winning lineups. So I think really high floor and decent ceiling on those two. So I like targeting that fight, and they're both going to be low owned.
That's the thing I was going to point out, right? We have Kim projected as of this morning 17% on DraftKings. Edwards just 15%, the lowest fight on the card. And just looking around the industry, no one's excited about that fight because they normally aren't with women's MMA fights. So really good call there if you're looking for a tournament differentiator. Really like that call, Jake. Let's see. All right, we got some questions in the chat. Let's see here. Okay, so Evan says the macro strategy we want is exactly one 5-round fight. Sounds like the upside might only be there with Nunes. Thoughts on no 5-rounders for like a third of your lineups? I think it can get there on this particular slate, Jake, but and this ties into who else's question here? AI's question about the Nunes Pena fight being a headache and he's tempted to fade it. And I think that's the issue here, right? If you're making one lineup, it is a headache because you may say, I don't know who's going to win, so I won't pick that fight. But I think, Jake, whoever wins is going to score a shit ton of points in that fight, Pena and Nunes. So you can't really just fade it just for the sake of reducing a headache because you're really reducing your EV if that's the reason you're fading it.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. I think the winner's going to score well. So if you say, well, each of them only have a 50% chance to win, whatever you want to call it, 60-40, 70-30, whatever you want to call it. If you don't play either, then you're giving yourself a 0% chance of hitting that winner. So you got to at least take one of them. And I mean, ideally play two lineups, or split your however many lineups you play, split it somewhat evenly because the winner of that fight is very most likely going to end up in the winning DraftKings lineup.
Especially if you're playing small field. Now, if you're playing the $25, right, or the $8 on FanDuel, yeah, there's a way they get left out of the optimal lineup. If you're playing anything less, whatever they score is going to be enough to get first place, right? You don't need the optimal in those contests. So let's see here. Rummy says we need OF merch with fighter name mispronunciations. I don't know if we have, Moose, do we even have a budget for as many mispronunciations as we have for these fighters? I don't know. So and Moose said for the ones if you can't hear him in the background, so for the ones he mispronounces, we definitely don't have the budget for that. So let's see here. Someone asked, Jonathan, what's up, Jonathan? Favorite FanDuel MVP? Jake, who would you go with there?
Just on that last question, I want to say I would definitely buy a shirt that said short notice debut. Fuck it.
True. Yeah, that's a good shirt.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Favorite FanDuel MVP?
Favorite FanDuel MVP. I think that's let me pull up some of the options that I had in the plug. I think there was a few guys I was looking at. And I think it's one of those weeks where you're kind of like, I could see this one going a few different ways. I'm always biased towards Pantoja. I think that guy is habitually underrated. I think he has the potential to get a bunch of submission attempts here, which is going to give him some sneaky high upside on FanDuel. So I really like Pantoja's upside. I think he's going to probably go pretty overlooked in general. I think there's a slight chance someone like Edwards could just put up a ridiculous amount of volume, and if she gets a late finish, that's going to score really well on FanDuel. She's going to be like 1% owned. So if you want a really crazy one, I think you could go that direction. But then I think there are a lot of potential guys that are going to be competing all within around the same range. So it's a little bit tricky. But if my favorite's probably Pantoja, and if I wanted to get really off the wall, someone like Edwards.
And what about if it was a 5-rounder? If you're playing it safer, favorite 5-rounder for MVP?
Well, I think in general you don't want to play the most popular one, which is going to be Nunes. So I think you could consider Pena or Moreno. Moreno's gonna have a tougher time getting there, but if no one really goes off and he lands more volume than expected, I think he could potentially get there. If you want to get completely crazy, you go Kai at $10. Like basically no one will play him, but I don't think he wins, so I'm not really excited about that.
Fair enough. Jack says, any concerns about the two fighters who missed weight? So one is Edwards, right, coming down from 145. The other is Kosi, who hasn't fought in a while. So that's a little more concerning to me, Jake. And a lot of potential upside in that fight. So, I mean, yes, the answer is we're concerned, but how concerned should we be when considering those fighters for our lineups?
Yeah, so historically, in general, underdogs have struggled a lot more than favorites when they miss weight, but it's still a bad sign for anyone. So, yeah, I'm concerned. I really liked Kosi before he missed weight, and then I definitely came down some on him. I still like Kosi, but, I definitely came off him a little bit. And in terms of Edwards, yeah, I mean, it's concerning, but I still think she has upside. I mean, we see favorites still win when they miss weight. Underdogs, pretty rare for underdogs to miss weight and win, but we definitely still see favorites miss weight and win. They're both favorites, so slightly less concerned, but always concerned when people miss weight.
Yeah, really good point about the discrepancy between favorites and underdogs there. Good stuff, Jake. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so we haven't talked about good fighter, bad fighter, everyone's favorite game. Only just a couple fighters because we have some newcomers. It's more established pay-per-view card. We do have a couple fighters. We're starting from the most expensive down to the least expensive. Real quick hitting. I'll name the fighter who has less than 4 fights in the UFC. Jake will tell us if they're actually a good fighter or a bad fighter because we don't have enough stats to really tell us this, and whether it's a good matchup or bad matchup for DFS. So from the most expensive to the least expensive, we have Michael Morales, who's minus 625 in his second UFC fight. Jake, good fighter, good matchup, bad matchup.
Good fighter, good matchup.
For sure. Okay, I'm scrolling down. Orion Kosi, who we just talked about missing weight.
Bad fighter, good matchup.
Okay. We don't have a ton here. I'm scrolling. I'm scrolling. Blood Diamond, which is one of the best names in MMA.
Bad fighter, bad matchup.
Well, that's rough. And then I think it says Alves, right? Rafael Alves. That's the only other one.
Yeah, Alves is a mediocre fighter in a bad matchup.
You cop out, dude.
I mean, I don't know if he's a good fighter, but if we're calling these other people bad, he's better than them. I mean, but I'm not prepared to call Alves good yet. He's kind of a one-trick pony. He punches people in the face and puts them in a guillotine. And if that doesn't work, he gasses out late.
That's a good point, as we see by his DraftKings scores. So, all right, guys. Any final questions? It's 9:30. Let's get him in there. We'll close out the show here. Ayo says, "Is it okay to fade this first fight? Could it possibly bust?" And that's the Kosi fight, right? Let me see. On the first on the card is Kosi and Blood Diamond. How does that fight bust, Jake? If it does.
I mean, any fight can bust, but I like targeting that fight, so I wouldn't completely. I mean, the way a fight like that busts is Kosi, controls the fight for 1 or 2 rounds, and then maybe Blood Diamond gets no stats and like an early third round finish or something, or we see it, go to a decision, not much happens. I mean, there's always ways a fight busts, but personally, I think that Kosi's either going to get him down and finish him, or a very slight chance that Diamond knocks him out in the feet. But if somehow it's a more back and forth affair, I mean, and it ends in a decision, then sure, there are ways it busts. But I like targeting it.
Fair enough. All right, Prize Picks. We don't have the promo up here on screen, but you can use promo code Occupy to get a $100 match bonus over at Prize Picks. Jake, any lines stand out to you? We could just give one play out. Again, Jake has more on his Patreon. We have more in the daily plug, OccupyFantasy.com. But Jake, any Prize Picks line that stands out to you the most as being soft this week?
Yeah, I really like Edwards over 80.5 significant strikes. Would she land her last fight like 164 or something? And this is an even better matchup to land more striking. As long as well, I would say Kim's not going to finish her. So as long as Edwards doesn't get an early finish, I think she easily passes 80. I think that one, you're just relying on going the distance. The odds implied is a 71% chance to go the distance. Really, even a late finish, you could get there. So really like that line.
I mean, we're there's a lot of talk, and probably more than anyone who's watching this expected of Edwards Kim fight. But again, we're looking for edges here, and Jake, I think you even covered some good edges for that fight. And it doesn't take much to be overweight on either of those fighters for your tournament lineups, if not both, if you're playing multiple lineups. So just keep that in mind here. All right, stream parlay of the week, where Jake, you hit yours last week, right? And I failed, wasn't it?
I bet I can't remember if it was last week. I think I had three in a row. I forget what I had last week. I've been doing pretty good lately, though.
Okay, I'll try to pull my weight here. So stream parlay. Jake will pick a bet. I'll pick a bet. We'll parlay it together. Remember, you can get all of Jake's best bets on MMADFS.com. He releases some early bets in the week where he crushes the closing line value. So make sure you go check that out if you're an early better. And then he puts his favorite bets that are still left in the daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com, which posts Friday evenings. Tons of great bets in there. So we've talked about this on many streams. For those who have watched, you know how we talk about split decisions in different states, the judges, the bigger cages, some of these pay-per-view cards, the way the matchups work. Split decisions are historically profitable bets on these types of cards. One that stood out to me, especially based on how we think the matchup could go with Potieria and Negumerianu. If Potieria gasses late but wins early, there's a real chance that this is a sloppy fight that the judges could see it many different ways. So I think that fight ending in a split decision, Jake, is one of the better ones. You could even go Edwards and Kim, a split decision, but for the stream parlay for the official pick, I'll go Potieria and Negumeriana ends in a split decision. And I think it's plus 800.
Yeah, it is. I like that. I mean, you look at Nega Mariano, two of his last three fights have been split decisions. I mean, historically, that's what his fights are. They're close, gritty fights. He's pushing people up against the cage. Judges are like, we don't know how to score this. I think we're going to see another one of those as long as Igor doesn't knock him out in round one, which is unlikely. So I really like that bet. And if we're going plus 800 on your leg, I'll go a little bit safer on mine. I'll go the Moreno Kaikara France fight goes the distance at negative 150. If you want to get crazy, you can make that split decision as well. I think that's plus 500, but I'll go the safer route here because we can still get plus 1400 parlay with our two legs. I think you can juice it up to like plus 5300 if you go split over just fight goes the distance. So we'll leave that up to the viewers. But for the official one, I'll go fight goes the distance, any sort of decision.
Very nice. And again, you can get all of Jake's work, MMADFS.com, where he breaks down every fight, historical matchups, historical information, context to all the fights, which is incredibly valuable. Betting DFS implications, his best bets. Patreon has some premium content as well, so MMADFS.com. OccupyFantasy.com, where Jake writes the daily plug, condenses it all down to his favorite DFS plays, lineup construction tips for different sites, different contests, his best bets, favorite prize picks plays, contest selection, literally everything you need to crush a slate in the daily plug. Our MMA model is up and running. It's been up since Thursday evening. Ranks every fighter. Again, I say this every week, and more each week are catching on to it, are starting to sign up to see what the MMA model is all about. Very profitable model, predicting fighter ceilings for FanDuel and DraftKings. And our lineup builder, build up to 300 lineups for FanDuel and DraftKings using our model, using our optimal lineup criteria. Lots of people wishing me well in the chat for the live final. Appreciate that so much. Appreciate everyone there for watching. Jake, any final thoughts on this card?
Hopefully it goes our way. Hopefully you win the live final, get to that tournament of champions, take that down as well. Just continue to crush it and good luck today, man.
Appreciate it, bro. And yes, that is the plan. Let's pray for no third straight week of a main event injury, which has been pretty unfortunate. So fingers crossed on that note. Again, you can follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. You can follow me at Brian Jester FF. Follow Moose, who's behind the scenes here at CFB_Moose. We'll be tweeting out stuff throughout the day as we're here live on scene in Dallas for UFC 277. Again, if you like what you saw, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We go live every Friday evening or Friday afternoons when football starts. But we put a UFC video out pretty much every single week. So make sure you're subscribed. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. Any questions? It'll probably be too late if you comment on this video, but we're always in the Discord server. We got our phones on us. Jake's in Discord, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. Come sweat out the fights with us, ask questions. We'd love to have you in there. So again, everyone out there, appreciate you watching and good luck and enjoy UFC 277.